Hello, everyone. I'm setting the scene today, and there's two scenes I wanted to focus on. Firstly, the external scene. How is AI impacting the landscape? How is it changing the way people consume information, create information? How does it affect our audiences? And the second thing I wanted to look at was how is it impacting us internally? How are we using AI in our own workspaces, in our own teams, in our own workflows? So those are the two scenes I wanted to set. And when I went looking for the slide, as you do, you look at the Meltwater slide. Where's my landscape slide? We've got a marketing team that's a really good landscape slide. And I found this. The landscape is shifting rapidly, permanently. I thought, I've written those words 100 times, right? We've all seen those words 100 times, right? We've all been talking about this since the dawn of our industry, rapidly, permanently, etc. Doesn't mean they're not true, but we've got to put them in some context to make them true for us right now. So I went looking for a visual of this, and I found this slide, which I think is supposed to show the complex information landscape we operate in. And I saw this, and I thought, yeesh, do you remember when it was this simple? Just like a few outlets, a few sources, a few journalists, and that was all the information we were consuming. Back in 2007, 2008, when I was in a press office, my outlets were literally Sun, Times, Telegraph, Guardian, Daily Mail, BBC Sky, maybe the Today programme if I got up early enough. And that was it. And I remember thinking at the time, gosh, this is a lot of content. This is moving so quickly. Even though I'd filed my lines at 5 o'clock and then doop, doop, doop off to the pub. Same as the journalists, right? So basically, it was not a 24-hour news cycle, regardless of what we were saying. So that was kind of the feeling at the time. It was like, this is so overwhelming. This is so fast. And then, of course, what we got is this. The algorithm took over. So no longer were our audiences going out and choosing to buy a certain kind of newspaper or choosing to tune into a certain news broadcast. Now the news and the content is coming to them regardless of what they choose and regardless of whether they like it or not, right? We know from the research done at Twitter, 2021 rather, that when they compared the results of the algorithms that were chosen by the humans or chosen by the algorithm, people preferred the human version of the feed, but that didn't make Twitter as much money. Right? So we know that this is coming to us regardless of how we like to consume it. And if you want to know how broken this is, that little QR code in the top left-hand there will take you some research that came out in August of this year, showing that the fundamental way these networks work is unfixable in terms of the impact it's having on our society. Right? So when they took the experiment of bots and vanilla networks and they sped it up over time, they realized that we ended up hating each other, right? To Jonah's kind of point here, we ended up being absolutely polarized by those networks, not because of anything we do, because the fundamental attention mechanic rewards emotions like anger, fear, and hate. Now, we're also blurring the lines of the content creators themselves. Anyone know who this is? Someone. Tilly Norwood, actress, completely AI. Anyone this one? Nope. Thank you. Gina Lopez, influencer. And most recently, this was a really interesting one. Anyone recognize the AI journalist? No, on Dispatches. So Dispatches use an AI journalist for most of their program, without even telling people that that's what they were watching. So we're now blurring the lines, not just in the content we're creating, we're blurring the lines of what is a content creator. Now they don't even have to be human. Tilly Norwood, by the way, absolutely guaranteed will land a role in some series or film, not least because whoever hires her knows that people are going to go watch that thing just to see how she performs. And we're just getting started. So I went looking for, if you're not familiar, Will Smith eating spaghetti is a benchmark for the quality of video production, right? And it came out kind of March of 2023. If you remember that kind of nightmare fuel video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. So no lip sync, no sound, just image, and it was complete craziness. Just 2 years later, I found this one from May of this year. Just 2 years later, look how far we've come. We've now got lip sync, we've got sound, we've got realistic background skin, realistic hands. Remember when that was a problem? That's just 2 years. So just imagine where we're going to be 2 years from now. So this is going back to the kind of the issue on our communities or our audience as a result of all this. This is kind of a personal hypothesis. of segmenting our audiences, we're into values, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors. That's effectively what's defining the audiences of tomorrow. This is going to get really tough if I'm doing this from memory, because I only made this, as Joe knows, I made these slides up at 11 o'clock last night. So, this slide is a complete surprise to me. So people buy brands, not products, right? This is making the problem worse. I thought this was a superfluous point, so I kind of made it, but people buy brands, not products, right? Which is a challenge because brands come with baggage, right? So the brand values, the attitudes and behaviors of the CEO, employee well-being, supply chain, all these things come into it now. And that's the challenge that brands are having. They're no longer selling products on, buy this product, does this, and it costs this. It's buy this product, look at who I am, look at what I do. And that causes the problem in terms of how to match that to the audience's behaviors. That's like, take the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? When that happened a few years ago, everyone was like, it's a sovereign country, they're invading, they're committing war crimes. Of course, we side with Ukraine. And brands made multi-billion-dollar decisions to get out of Russia because of that. But what if Russia invaded Ukraine now? Would that still be the same decision? I don't think so. So, it's over there. What do we need to know to decide our actions in this new world? First, recognize that, indeed, as a 4 and 2 mentioned, that not all audiences are important. So, this is a really great example, actually, of a brand I think recognizes that new world, the need to kind of measure based on audiences and brands and values. So if you remember this guy, Colin Kaepernick, took the knee during the national anthem at his games. There was calls for boycotts, calls for him never to play again, et cetera, et cetera. And it may not jump out at you like that's a poster boy for a national campaign. But Nike said, hold my Bud Light, and did a national campaign focused on him because, in part, they'd run the numbers. Not just because, yes, it aligned with their brand values, but they realized the people calling for the boycotts, the cancellations, were not the people burning through 3 pairs of Nike sneakers in a year, right? So they'd done the numbers, and that, I think, is what is expected of us. No longer the demographics. This is basically the measurement based on values and beliefs and behaviors. No, literally no idea. Literally no idea. That isn't me. E. So, if you're going to do that effectively, what do you need? You need all of the data. If we are, and as we see, we're on this kind of curve by which every individual audience becomes segmented, you need all of that data. You also need everything that the LLMs are doing to get their data from those networks. Because remember, that is now the first window. That is where people are going to get their information in the first instance. So how those organizations feel about your brand is as important, if not more important, than how you measure the behavior of those entire networks. And if you're not optimizing for those algorithms, if you're not optimizing for those agents, you may not even get to those audiences at all. What does that mean? How do we do that? I literally have no idea. I don't think I can give you a guess right now based on the data we've got right now, but I don't think you can rely on it. I think that's a lagging indicator of what we've seen so far. That could change tomorrow. So I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not going to sell any snake oil about here's how you do it. No one knows. And if anyone tells you they know, they're lying. So you've got all of the data. With great data comes great responsibility to analyze it all, right? And this is where the AI comes in. The second scene, how we're using AI internally, or at least what the problems I've seen in the market for people trying to use AI internally. Firstly, accuracy versus scalability. This is a trade-off people are trying to figure out how to make right now. 2, the problem of just generally generic outputs from AI. 3, the unbearable bluntness of Boolean. Going to deal with that. And usability, right? The challenge that when you're joining this industry, the very first thing you have to learn is like how to navigate this extremely complex piece of software. And you know what, if you change jobs, good luck, you know, to learn a completely new one. Got to fix that problem. So, accuracy versus scalability. So what I'm seeing right now is that, 1, people are relying too much on generative AI as the solve-all, as the silver bullet. That if you're trying to get a speedy answer, if you're trying to deal with the volume information, if what you want is consistency and explainability, generative AI is not your friend. It was built to be creative, not consistent. And it's a giant model, capable of writing a song that sounds like U2, but using only words written by Shakespeare, right? You don't want a model that big trying to do something very simple and very precise. which is something you probably still want to use. Right now, you probably still want to use a good old-fashioned classic AI, good hardcore data science, a good old NLP-based model, right? Where you've got speed, you've got volume, you've got consistency. If you give it the data today, and 3 years later you give it a different piece of data, it will give you the same analysis, exactly the same. So if you're trying to do performance over time and comparisons over time, you absolutely still need that kind of AI. But if what you want to do is explain the spikes, if you want to explain the reasons, then generative AI is your friend. What I'm saying is you need both. You can't rely on one or the other. And this is a challenge for the startups entering this market where effectively like generative AI is all they've got because they don't have the data science backing that some of us do in the room. That's a real challenge. You need both. Generic outputs. Yes, if you ask AI to give me a social post without any explanation of the reason why you want the social post or the audiences or what you're trying to achieve, you're going to get generic outputs. But this is an example of a model we're using at Meltwater to understand what is it I need to extract from the human, what do I need to get from their heads into the software in order to make the AI outputs better, right? Context. All of this is context. But firstly, I need to get the information that's in their head that the model doesn't have. Secondly, I need to know who are the audiences we're talking about here. How are you defining those audiences? Not how I, the LLM, have decided to define those audiences based on what I've read. How are you defining them? The strategy. How does this actually contribute to the business outcomes, right? How do I extract that from the human and get it into the software so the AI can use it? Empathy will never change as a human task, right? The LLM will give you a reasonable output, a logical output, like a legal output, but is it ethical? Is it right? And is there bias? And that's still a human task. And then the direction. When to start, when to stop. Is it good enough, right? The AI told me to is not a defense in court. So you still need to take responsibility for the output you're putting into the world. And I'm building that into the systems we're building at Meltwater. Now, the bluntness of Boolean. This is a little bit technical, but this is the future direction of travel, right? So anyone love Boolean in the room? That's more than I expected. So we're not going to get rid of Boolean. We still need Boolean for certain use cases, right? Boolean gives you a really nice defined bucket, a consistent definition and explainable logic to describe what mentions ended up in that bucket and which ones didn't. But it is a nightmare if you're new to the industry, and it is a nightmare if what you're trying to do is discover new topics or expand your view, right? Vector search, which is not sexy sounding at all, but I think is super cool, is effectively how we're addressing that most intractable of problems for this industry. The bluntness of Boolean solved by vector search. Vector search works in a very specific way. I'm going to show you how that works in a second. So let's say you've been given the task, right? You're investigating kitten food, right? You're wondering, what do they want to say about kitten food right now, for example? Vector search would allow you to just put popular kitten foods. You're not looking in the hell that is kitten near 5 food, right? Good luck with that and trying to get the noise out of the search if you're in near 5 hell. But vector search, just type in natural language what it is you're actually after. And the way vector search works is that effectively each of those words is translated into a number. That number is plotted in a multi-dimensional space, and then you've effectively got the proximity, the closeness of those terms and those entities to others. And that's how it works. It's a lot fuzzier than Boolean, but it is great for expanding your search, for expanding what it is you're looking for, and then using that to create more Boolean. So it is an absolute great partner for Boolean. You don't need to throw Boolean in the bin. What you do need is both if you want to get the best results. Now, this is controversial. I think that generative AI specifically is actually more of a user experience revolution than it is an insights revolution. I think generative AI can help us with the challenge that most people don't know how to use the software in our industry. It can help us with that more than it can help us with identifying insights we wouldn't previously have found. What I mean by that is right now in this industry, every single piece of software you use, you're the human with a little bit of help from the AI, right? You have to drive everything. You have to know how to navigate the software to find the AI to help you with a specific task. And nothing happens unless you drive it, which is a challenge if you don't know how to drive the process and if you don't know how to navigate the software. Yeah? Right now, your ability to get value from products like ours is limited to your ability to navigate it. And that is what we're changing with generative AI. That's what we've changed with Mirror Studio, for example. So where we end up, is the exact opposite. Right? Now, you need to know what it is you want to do, and the AI needs to know how to navigate the software. We don't need to force that kind of knowledge into your heads anymore. That's the flip. That's the change. That's actually the realization of the revolution in my book, and that's what we're heading for. In fact, like, I think she said it better than anyone could, right? We're trying to find what the laundry and dishes are of this industry. That's what we want to spend our AI on. And I will not do this because we're probably a little bit short of time, and Jonah's given me the eye. But at Meltwater, we've spent multiple millions making all this stuff really work really well. In summary, generative AI is not a silver bullet. You absolutely need to bring context into the system. You need to kind of systemize the context. Context and engineering is the key. Don't limit yourself to just the Boolean. We've got a better way right now. And AI works for you where you need it, when you need it. That's the real key to the use of AI. I think there is no end slide. That's it. I'm done.